Welcome to the CBIA BizCast powered by Google. I'm Amanda Marlowe with CBIA. On this podcast, we dive into the stories about businesses and business leaders who are shaping the future of Connecticut's economy. This week, we are very excited to be joined by Michelle McCabe, the Executive Director of Connecticut Main Street Center. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Very excited.
Well, we are so excited to have you here and excited to learn about what you guys are doing in different parts of the state. But first, we want to know a little bit about you and how you got here in Connecticut and what makes you so passionate about this state.
Well, I was born here and I was raised here. And, you know, it's one of those things that you don't necessarily appreciate how amazing your state is until you go away and you come back. But Connecticut is just a great place. It has everything. It has mountains, it has beaches, it has farmland, it has great music and food and people and towns. And so it's such a pleasure not only to be back here in Connecticut and working and living and raising my family, but also to be able to support all the ways that make Connecticut a really fabulous place to play, work, and visit.
And a lot of those things that you just described often can be found on main streets.
Absolutely. Main streets are where everything happens.
So tell me a little bit about Connecticut Main Streets and what you guys do.
So Connecticut Main Street Center has been here in the state for over 2 decades, and we're actually a coordinating program of the National Main Street program, which came from the National Center for Historic Trust. And our role here in the state is to support vibrancy on our main streets everywhere, from our urban centers, suburbans, small towns, all of it. And we do that by providing technical assistance, bringing in best practices, offering support in a lot of different ways, sometimes providing funding. It runs the gamut, really, because having a vibrant Main Street is no easy feat. It requires, a lot of work, and so we're here to support that work.
And it's a big commitment for, the organizations that are involved. Some places have someone dedicated to the Main Street, others have smaller departments.
Yes, that's correct. So we're a member-based organization, and so different municipalities have somebody who is part of our circle. And it can be, like you said, anyone from somebody who's an executive director of a nonprofit that oversees main streets, like if they're in a special taxing district, for example. Sometimes it's someone that is working in a municipal economic development department. It could be anywhere, really. And so we're there to support them in making sure that they have all the tools they need to make their main streets thrive.
Awesome. And, obviously you've come here, you've held a lot of different hats over the years. Tell me a little bit about where you came from and kind of how you're hoping to really help Connecticut Main Street Center thrive.
Sure. So yes, I've been working in nonprofit, on and off for over 20 years, betraying my age. My career has run the gamut from working in museums to advocacy around local agriculture to working in nonprofits that focused on small business and workforce development. And it's a real pleasure to bring all of those skills to Main Street because all of these issues really intersect on Main Street. You have arts and culture, transit, housing, workforce, great businesses, whether they're retail or they're restaurant. So for me, I feel like this is a great opportunity to bring those skills of running a nonprofit and all of the fun of programming to come to bear in supporting this organization that does so much.
Yeah, I think it's super unique that you've had, touched every aspect of it, and now you're kind of pulling it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forgot to mention, too, that I've done a lot of work in policy, and I'm even currently part of my town's local government. And that is an important part on Main Street as well, is making sure that we have those policies in place that make our businesses thrive, that give people a place to live, that gives them a way to get to work, and all of those things. Great schools, everything.
Yeah, there's so many things that, people think about main streets and they think they're downtown shops and small restaurants and other things, but there's so much other aspects to it, including policy and buy-in from the community that really go into making these communities thrive.
Oh, absolutely. Small decisions that our commissions make have a big impact on Main Street, without a doubt. Questions of zoning, questions of even just parking. The things that we don't really think about and take for granted are part of that machinery that keeps things going.
So when we think about a main street, it can mean many different things. What are some of the aspects that go into a main street that really help make it vibrant and, a gathering place?
Well, a main street, it's an ecosystem, right? There are a lot of moving parts that all have to be working in synchronicity for a main street to be truly vibrant. Some of them are the things that you would see. It can be, street signage, knowing where to go, planters, awnings, sidewalks that you don't trip and fall on your face when you're trying to, get around. It's having a variety of things to do, whether it's places to eat or to get things done, a dry cleaner or the post office, events, arts and culture that engage you. All of those things work together to have the adequate foot traffic, to keep all of those businesses thriving. And also people live on main streets. What's really exciting is that we're seeing a renaissance of main streets because it's a place that people now want to live. It used to be that, people were interested in living out in a neighborhood with, an acre of lawn to take care of and a 2-car garage and chicken in every pot. But now, people of all ages are really excited to live in a place where they can walk out their door and access anything that they need and that they want. And that's what people are looking for. And that's why I think we're seeing such a return to Main Street that is long in coming, if you ask me.
And you've been able to see so many main streets, I'm sure, in the past, several months being new to your position. Tell me a little bit about some of the ones maybe that surprised you or that have really had that, becoming in the last couple of years.
I think what's so exciting is that every community has something special and unique to offer. So I couldn't obviously pick just one, but I will say too that I grew up in Connecticut and I was reminded of how infrequently growing up and even as a young adult, I took advantage of the fact that we have so many different great places to visit. I think all of us are a little guilty of that, staying in our little corner, wherever corner that might be. So some of the places that was so excited to get to know, Middletown, which has a really exciting main street. You can eat probably around the world and back again at all the variety of restaurants that are there, but they're also great stores and shopping, and they're going to be developing the riverfront, which will be really cool. Manchester has a wonderful Main Street brewery, and they also have a lot of artists that are working there and great shopping. And they had a fun summertime alleyway activation where they took an alley and had live music and live art, and local artisans were tabling there, which was really fun. Bridgeport is doing some really cool stuff with around walking tours. So they receive funding from Connecticut Humanities, and they do these really, really interesting walking tours that you can go on that really show the history of that downtown. So yeah, the Warner Theater in Torrington, that they're like an anchor that's doing so much with other nonprofits along that Main Street with amazing pizza as well. I know we talked about that earlier. Don't want to get communities in a pizza war, but I have to say I was really surprised at how awesome Torrington pizza was. So yes, there's every Main Street has something unique to offer.
And that's kind of some fun that, families and people, especially I think even in the holiday season that we're kind of getting into, people are like, oh, let's shop at small businesses. Let's go to these main streets and make small day trips out of them.
Yes, and what's so great too is that it is really an all-day adventure. That's what I love about Main Street too, is when you can just park your car and spend the day. You can shop, you can eat, you can potentially go to a show or a movie or an art gallery. And I think of my hometown of Fairfield. You could literally spend the entire day doing 100 different things, it feels like, which is so much fun. So I think, some of it is recognizing that, yes, you're supporting small businesses, for example, on Main Street, but really you have a whole experience that you can plan around for your whole day, which is what makes it so much fun.
Are there, I know with each Main Street that you just talked about, for example, you kind of hit on like 1 to 2 things that really stand out. Is it important for Main Streets to have, 1 to 2 staples or a mix of restaurants and shops? What are some of those smaller things that really help improve a Main Street?
I think you really hit the nail on the head when you were talking about variety. I think that Main Streets are a curated experience, to put it in those terms, in that it does require a nice mix of different things. Like imagine if you had a Main Street where you had lots of options to eat, but that was the only thing that you could do there. Like that's not enough of a mix to sustain a place like that. And so that's one of the reasons why not only Connecticut Main Street is here, but we're here to help communities invest in the people that are needed to really make sure that your Main Street is a thriving corridor. It seems effortless, but obviously it really isn't, to keep storefronts from being vacant, to keep foot traffic regular, to sustain the businesses and the professionals that are there. It is not something that happens without a lot of work. And so to have somebody there that's really making sure that the streets are clean and welcoming and that the businesses have what they need is really important.
And I think that kind of segues well into, my next question. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the programs that you're excited about that you guys are doing, that people should know about and businesses could help be a part of?
Yes, absolutely. So we are partnering with the state of Connecticut to do a number of gatherings around the Small Business Boost Fund, for example. But Connecticut Main Street is approaching it in our Connecticut Main Street way, which is to engage our membership, the folks that are working with small businesses on their Main Street, to look at this fund and think about how can we encourage businesses to increase their working capital with the interest of all of Main Street in mind. How can we see some of the things that could use some improvement and then create sort of a group effort using this Small Business Boost Fund as a spark. We also are partnering with Connecticut Vibrant Communities Coalition, which is an organization that is organized through LISC, to do a webinar on receivership, which was a policy that was passed in 2019. And so we're doing a webinar to instruct, again, our audience on how that is a great tool to improve property management and development on Main Street, which is really important.
Awesome. And that's something that these webinars are easy for people to attend, get some information, and can follow up.
Absolutely. You can go on our website, which is ctmainstreet.org, and on our events page, you can sign up for the webinars, and we also record them, and they're on our YouTube channel if you're unable to make it. Awesome. And we're also looking to partner with a lot of communities working on different projects. Some of it is this idea of a curated Main Street, where we want to bring together all of the stakeholders on Main Street to look at vacant properties and think about how we can start putting some of our entrepreneurs in those spaces to revitalize those Main Street corridors, looking at how we can activate a cultural institution. How do movie theaters or performing arts theaters, how can they activate, because we know that they do activate a Main Street, and how do we harness the power of their audiences to help every business that's up and down that corridor? So we have a lot of projects in the works.
Awesome. And it's so interesting because I think, we've looked at a lot of numbers coming out of the pandemic, and there were so many new startups, a lot of entrepreneurs really taking the time to kind of craft what their vision was. So it seems like we're going to have a lot of businesses that are ready to take on those spaces.
Oh, that's a great point. And it's so true that the pandemic did have people reconsider what they wanted to do for a living. And a lot of those entrepreneurs are ready to move into brick and mortar spaces. And we were really lucky to be introduced to a new group of promising retailers through Reset, an organization here in Hartford. They have a retail incubator that is going on right now. And I was fortunate enough to participate in one of their sessions and meet their cohort of entrepreneurs. And I have to tell you, I was so struck by the fact that each one of them, while they are working on a product, they are so community focused. It's always more than the product that they're developing or they're making, always. They're so excited to move onto a main street, to be able to have social gatherings, to be able to have classes for young people, to be able to combine what they do with a maker space or some kind of small scale manufacturing. They're extraordinarily savvy, but more importantly, they're so community oriented that placing these entrepreneurs on Main Street, I think, is going to be a game changer, because they're going to be thinking about foot traffic. They're going to be thinking about bringing the community together and not just about, oh, I'm going to sell my beauty products or my clothing. Like, it's so much more. And so all the businesses and all the restaurants and all the people surrounding those entrepreneurs are going to benefit from their way of approaching business, which I think is extraordinarily exciting.
And I think that's one of the really positive things about Connecticut businesses in general, just the buy-in to community. And that really goes back to these main streets and, you know, getting businesses to kind of help support them, because we know that they care, they are putting their money in these places, and it's so important to kind of continue to see these grow. Now, with the pandemic, are there any things that you've noticed with Connecticut Main Streets that has changed a little bit because of the pandemic?
Oh, sure, absolutely. It's hard to even quantify how many different things changed because of the pandemic. So first and foremost, I think that people really came to see Main Street as a safe gathering space. You know, we were forced to be outside a lot, and in a way that really activated these corridors of commerce when we had outdoor dining, you know, the different ways that businesses learn to diversify how they reach their customers, people wanting to be outside as much as possible, but in the presence of others. All of those things, people wanting to live downtown now that, you know, it was so hard to get what you needed to be in the middle of it all. That convenience, I think, came to the forefront because of the pandemic. People wanting to support small businesses however they could came to the forefront. And I think that all of that also led people to a new appreciation of what their main streets look like, because they were spending more time in them. They were outside eating and looking around. And so I think that all of that brought a lot of really positive attention that hasn't diminished. If anything, I think it's increased now that we're moving into whatever this new phase is. I think that people are still looking to be a part of their local community in that way.
Yeah, I think, you know, so many people, like you said, just stayed around. They weren't traveling every weekend to different places. I think, you know, if you look at our local state parks, they were buzzing during the summer months. But so were a lot of these downtown spaces, even if it was just a place to gather.
Yes, absolutely. And so we're seeing, I think, a lot of really exciting, like I said, appreciation of the outdoor part of what a main street is. So like, for example, Bridgeport is about to unveil a series of new murals, outdoor art projects, public art projects that they're doing. And again, like these ideas of walking tours, that there is such a sensitivity now to that built environment, which again is what makes visiting each of these communities so exciting. So yeah, I think that we're on the way to seeing, just, again, to keep using the same word, but just such a renaissance of these spaces.
Awesome. Obviously, there's no secret. There's, you know, a workforce struggling right now. There's a shortage. How is your organization really helping with that? And what can we do if a lot of these small businesses just can't find the workers?
Yes, well, we definitely are engaged in both of those issues, because obviously, first and foremost, that workforce is necessary for all of us, including Main Street businesses, to keep things humming. So that's one piece that we're looking at. How do we keep Connecticut or make Connecticut affordable? How do we look at where workers are and getting them to where they need to be? Are the transit systems stepping, are they where they need to be to get workers from point A to point B? Is the housing where it needs to be to get workers from point A to point B? So that's one thing, is how do we support the existing workforce that supports our Main Street businesses? The second way that we're engaged in workforce development is training those professionals who we need to run a Main Street, and so we're starting a Main Street Accelerator program where we will be hosting a cohort of those professionals and pre-professionals to train them in Main Street management according to the national standard and our own standards of Main Street management. And then finally, part of Connecticut needing a workforce is encouraging that workforce to move here. Some of it is making sure that our college graduates stay or come back, that we're enticing people to come here. And we know that vibrant Main Streets is an enormous draw. These are the places that even if your corporate headquarters, let's say, is not in a Main Street, the Main Street is where your workers are going to want to live. And so it's so important that these are spaces that are not just affordable, but fun and exciting and vibrant to attract the workforce to come and live here. So in all of those ways, Connecticut Main Street Center is, being a partner to CBIA, to the state, to everybody, because we know how important it is to ensure that we have the workers here in Connecticut to keep our state where it needs to be.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point about, getting people to come to these areas to live. I know there's so many people when you're thinking about moving now, it's like you said, it's not as, rural, but even some of these main streets are in those areas where you can still get really close to downtown and have that community feel.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because, people make a lot of their decisions based on emotions in some ways. Even corporations do. There are corporations that located here in Connecticut because of its beauty, the rolling hills, the mountain, whatever it might be. And people make those same decisions too, that there are people that are going to look to live here and then maybe even find a job after that, So I think it's just incumbent upon us to make sure that we leverage all that we have, because we really do have it all here, and if some downtowns are just needing that extra push, that's really all they need, because the bone structure is already there,
And for businesses who may not be right downtown, but really want to contribute to their main streets, what's the best way for them to get involved?
Well, certainly some of it is to get involved, with Connecticut Main Street. Supporting us is supporting our ability to expand the capacity of all of these towns that are looking to have a vibrant Main Street. And part of their challenges, as we mentioned before, is, in some cases it's a person for whom Main Street is just one of many responsibilities that they have. And so that's, again, where Connecticut Main Street steps in, and we sort of add that extra oomph to help them be able to showcase their Main Street, to improve their Main Street, et cetera. So some of it is for businesses really to partner with us to make sure that even if their corporate headquarters, again, are off-site, that they are investing in their Main Street's ability to keep their workers happy and to make it, a fun place for for their CEOs to go and have dinner.
Yeah, certainly. And you mentioned, I know, we're working together, CBIA, Reset, the state. Are there any other big organizations that you guys are partnering with?
Sure. I mean, we obviously are partnering with everyone that we can, because everybody, again, has a part to play, on Main Street. So as I mentioned, we're partnering with LISC, we're partnering with Women's Business Development Council and the Black Business Alliance, again, to look at ways that we can bring entrepreneurs onto Main Street, partnering with Connecticut Council of Small Towns and the COGS, because we're all working, again, to not only enhance our towns, but very specifically everybody's neighborhood, which is the main streets. We are working with Desegregate Connecticut because we know that it's really important that people can afford to live here and that, again, our workforce can get where they need to go. Doing a lot of work with Connecticut Humanities and Connecticut Office of the Arts, because arts and culture are an important facet to our community, not just in terms of giving us exciting things to do, but really in this moment, it's bringing us together as a community, which is so important. Having those, conversation, dialogue, and learning about each other, which is something that arts and culture really brings to the table. So, as Connecticut Main Street, we know how important it is to work together, to convene all stakeholders, because again, that's what Main Street is all about. And so we are working with lots of organizations to make sure that, they're all able to participate in our Main Street revitalization effort.
Now, to kind of close out a little bit, I'm going to give you a little bit of a tough one.
Oh,
so,
no.
When you think about all of these things, trying to get Main Streets to become more successful, to be more vibrant, what is, the biggest thing that really can help support you guys and is going to be part of the success story?
I would say that Main Street itself, again, is an ecosystem, right? It's a place where this is the place where so many different people and interests and activities not only come together, but have to work together. And to see, it's not just your business in your store. You're part of a fabric of a lot of businesses and entities that if they are all working together, that's what makes success. And I think that outlook is true not only on Main Street, but looking at Main Streets across the entire state. That, yes, it's so exciting and wonderful to champion what makes your town special. But your town needs other towns and other cities and other people to really thrive and be successful. And so part of what I think is the most important, when you're asking what's the one thing, I would say that's the one thing, is for us to be able to balance what your community looks like, which is great, and what that community looks like as part of the larger community that is Connecticut, or the larger community that is, your county, or the larger community that is your region, and so I would say that the more we're able to both look inward and outward, the better we're all going to be. And so I think that that's what I especially love about working for Connecticut Main Street Center, is that is by nature our philosophy. And I think that carrying that philosophy beyond even the boundaries of Main Street is such a privilege to be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we're so excited to see, what you continue to do and explore some of these Main Streets this winter.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I think the work that CBIA is doing is so important. And it's also important that for us to be working together the way that we are, because small business, after all, is the heart and soul of Main Street. And so I'm really excited for what lies ahead for Connecticut.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast on Apple or YouTube. And while you're there, leave us a review and let us know if you have ideas for a future podcast. And as always, for a full list of episodes, head on over to CBIA.com.